Good afternoon, everyone. You are very welcome to the Universum Most Attractive Employers Index for Graduates 2022. The panel will be delighted to receive any questions you may have. Please use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your PC or laptop screen. If you're using an iPad, you will find this feature located at the top of your screen. Without further ado, I would now like to hand you over to Irish Jobs General Manager Orla Moran. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us here today for the Most Attractive Employers Index for Graduates for 2022. My name is Orla Moran. I'm General Manager of Irish Jobs, and joining me here today from Universum is Steve Ward, Head of Employer Branding, and his colleague Rosemary Haughey, Employer Branding Consultant. Steve, it's fantastic to be doing this live from the Irish Jobs office here in Grand Canal because we've been hosting these sessions virtually for the last 2 years.
Oh, it's bliss. It feels great to be doing this in real life again. I'm sure everybody's happy to do any of this stuff live again, but it's great to do it in an amazing location by Grand Canal Quay here in person. And it's very much reflective of what we're seeing in a lot of our research that we're going to be talking through this year about how more the return to real life is impacting everything now. So it impacts us in a good way now because this is much nicer than doing it on screen. But certainly, yeah, very happy to be here doing this with you guys again.
You know, I've worked in Irish Jobs and in the recruitment industry for a long time, and I've never seen, an environment like we have now. In our latest jobs index, we saw jobs increasing by 44% year on year. That's putting a lot of pressure on companies attracting talent, isn't it?
Yeah, look, so we as you can probably imagine, given what you've just explained and given that real challenge that everybody's hiring so prodigiously at the moment, the challenge is the talent isn't out there quite as readily as it was previously. Employer branding is super hot right now. It's a real hot potato, hot subject. And therefore, we're in high demand in the Universum world because, of course, it's getting harder and harder to attract the talent. And the way in which we go to audience with our messages, with our stories, and with our proposition is more important, I would say, than ever, given the hot competition. So, yeah, absolutely. We're busy people at the moment, it's fair to say.
Very good complaint.
Yeah, it's not a problem, not a bad problem to have.
So Steve, tell us a little bit about how the rankings are actually calculated, if you wouldn't mind.
I will, yeah, absolutely. So we do this every year. We go to market in 40 countries in the world to collect student data and professional data, but for the purposes of what we're discussing today and in Ireland, we go out every year through the universities, through the student groups, communities, and through social media to collect as much insights as we possibly can from the next generation of talent coming into the workplace. And in this particular year, the survey was between October of last year and March of this year. So that's the prime period where students are experiencing the campus campaigns that are happening from all the companies and also engaging with companies through the early stages of their application process. So in that period, in the surveys that we do, it's really deep. Each student will take a 30-minute survey. It's quite a deep piece of insight, and we really get under the skin of what's important to them, what are the challenges they're facing going into the workspace, and the kind of companies that are attractive to them. And that's what we'll focus on a lot today, along some of the insights. So seriously robust piece of insights.
So that'll be really powerful data then for anybody listening in our audience today, given just how competitive a marketplace it is at the moment. So I'd say probably without further ado, we can kick off now, Steve, if you'd love to share the insights with us, and also, very importantly, the rankings.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Orla. And so I'm going to look through some of the key employer trends. So over the course of the session today, we'll look at some of the key insights from the research, so very specifically, some of the stuff that we found inside the research that probably is impacting talent right now. And of course, we'll do the fun bit of trying to find out who are the key employers in Ireland in 2022 in the eyes of students. But what I want to cover just for the next few minutes is what are some of the big trends that are facing recruitment teams right now and are affecting employer branding and influencing the way in which employer branding is changing in 2022. And probably the first one, and this is where we see a lot of our work right now, is the proposition to talent needs reevaluating. If you are out there and you created an EVP 2 years ago before the pandemic, it's already out of date, I'm sorry to tell you, because despite the amount of money that you probably spent on that EVP 2 years ago, the world has changed, and talent from our research is looking for different things, demanding different things of employers, but not just from an employment perspective. Their lives have changed dramatically. As a consequence, a lot of the choices they make in life have changed, and the things that they regard as important to them, family life, preferences, things that are important. The world has changed dramatically, and therefore some of the things that are important to students and young talent has evolved as well. And we've seen this quite dramatically in our research over the last 2 to 3 years as the pandemic has taken hold. And so what that means is companies are spending an enormous amount of time reevaluating their EVP, or in many cases, and we certainly see this with some of the companies we're working with in Ireland, creating an EVP for the first time. What is an EVP? For those of you who maybe aren't familiar with that, that's the employer value proposition. So that's the story and the proposition we present to talent. And that's talent externally, but also talent internally. What is it that we are selling to them effectively in simple terms? What's the narrative? What's the mantra? What are we about as a business? What will it feel like to work here? And what are the opportunities for being part of it? And so, as you can probably imagine, a lot of companies are now reevaluating what that proposition is, because remote working is a massive part of the change. Our relationships with colleagues internally has subsequently changed enormously. And indeed, our impact, our awareness of the impact around the globe is a little bit wider as well. And we see that with this research with students, that there is a change in feel. And we'll see some of that as we go through some of the insights today. But I alluded to just briefly one other piece, which was around the impact of employer branding and an EVP internally as much as externally. So typically and historically, employer brand has been seen to be a thing that is around the outbound. It's about how do we go and sell ourselves to talent? How do we compete with talent externally, compete with our competitors externally with talent? How do we tell stories externally and use it for recruitment marketing? But what we've noticed this year, and this year in particular, is the first subject, when a company comes to us to say we're looking to evaluate our EVP and re-look at it, actually what they're saying, the first thing they want to do is unite the organization, bring back together the organization. Because for 2 years, in many cases, we've been quite far apart. We've been remote, we've been in different places, and we've turned into remote organizations, not by choice, but by the circumstances that are presented upon us. What that means is the dynamic of our relationship with our talent and with each other has evolved. And now as we bring them back together a little bit more, we need to unite them, we need to bring back together. So this is one of the messages that we're getting a lot, that people are looking at first how the EVP and employer brand impacts internally. And from that means things like looking at what the internal stories are, communicating those stories internally to talent, making sure across the board in our organization, they are aware of what we're doing as an organization, what we believe is important, and the message that we want to send as we move forward as an organization in what seems like a new world from where we were 2 or 3 years ago. And that means looking out for ambassadors. It means looking inside the organization at who can amplify our employment status, our EVP, our employer branding, much, much more. So this shift from primarily external focus and into more of an internal focus is a very noticeable switch in the terms of employer branding and EVP. So that's certainly something else to look out for. And the third thing I want to look at is alluding to what Orla mentioned earlier about how much harder it is to find talent right now. People are hiring more, but talent has moved. I did a webinar actually a couple of years ago called "Where's My Talent Gone?" And because the idea was that everybody's moved on, they've moved into different worlds, they're looking in different places, and so this is one of the other trends that we've identified just from asking the direct questions to students and professionals over the last kind of couple of years, is their consumption of career data, their career information, their opportunities is evolving too. It's changing, and because we've also seen an erosion of trust in the last year or so because of the pandemic switch from hypercare from our remote situations into a return to the work, and actually maybe some of those transitions have not been the most smooth or not been the most heartwarming in the way in which we've done it. There's an element of mistrust. We found this in our data last year, that there was a dip in trust in our employers and our leaders, and there's a feeling of there's a lack of trust in us doing our jobs the way that we should be because they feel as though they're not trusting us from a remote location. So this means that talent is changing its mind about the way in which it looks at its employers and the relationship it wants to have with employers before it's even started. And what we're therefore noticing is the generic environment is not so easy to find people anymore. We've got to dip into the places in which they are existing in every day, and we've got to talk to them in a language that creates a magnetic effect, that creates a human effect, rather than a business, career, this is your job, this is your opportunity effect. Much more about engaging, and this is where we identified in the Universum world in the last couple of years especially, that there is an increase in the engagement in the likes of social media, in the way in which we, in their normal feed, because of course what's happened in the last 2 years is we've all become increasingly digital. And as you can probably imagine, there's a little bit of digital fatigue that comes from that. People are sick of filling forms in, they're sick of completing things online. So they're consuming social behavior, human behavior online. And so how can we adapt our communications to be more social, to be more natural, to be more in line with the social environments in which they exist in? And therefore, what we're working with a lot of companies on is how to find the very human, real factors from our employer brand, the bits that connect from a personal, family, engagement, culture, purpose perspective. And the way of doing that is hitting people right in the right areas in which they're operating. And so that means as recruitment teams, we've got to get better at our marketing capabilities, almost like consumer marketing. We've almost got to start to mirror that a little bit in the way we do our brand marketing, our employer brand marketing, because we need to tell stories and guide people and be magnetic to people in spaces where they most naturally exist and probably weren't expecting to see career opportunities or stories. But they have to be done in the best way. And it's been super exciting to watch that change, because what it means is companies are having to think a little bit harder about how we communicate with talent in that kind of way. So those have been some 3 noticeable shifts that I've sort of gone on a bit of a story there, really. The evaluation of what our promise to talent is and how we look after our employers and what it feels like to work for an organization. Secondly, the fact that our internal audiences are as important in this as external audiences. We need to get them on board. They need to be part of the journey. They need to be reinforced as well to aid retention and keep people employed and engaged with the organization. And finally, when we do go out to talent externally, we've got to do it in a way now that resonates in the way that talent consumes employer content, what they care about the most, and in the places that are most prevalent and most comfortable. And if we start to think about getting those 3 areas right, our opportunities in this very challenging work environment and recruitment environment will no doubt increase, needless to say. So hopefully there's some interesting things that that set the scene a little bit as to what I'm seeing in the industry and what we're seeing across, not just in Ireland, but across the globe right now in employer branding. But what we want to move on to now is to start to look at some of the winners, because that's the fun bit. That's what we're here to do, is to find out who are the most attractive organizations in Ireland. So we're going to start with the business section. And so here's a little run through of what the 20 best companies for business students are in Ireland.
So let's start with the business students rankings for 2022. Who are the top 20 most attractive companies in Ireland for business students this year? Well, looking first at the top 20, from 20 to 11, we see here a little bit of movement. To start with, we see Ryanair performing really well, as well as Morgan Stanley and Aer Lingus in those early reaches. But let's jump into the top 10 and see who's been doing well there. So quite a bit of movement this year. At number 10, we have EY, and EY taking a little drop, 2 places for EY. PwC dropping 4 places to 9th. Facebook, or Meta as we now know them as, have jumped up into 8th place this year. Amazon stay as they are in 7th place. JP Morgan make a really good jump, 4 places up to 6th place in the most attractive rankings. 5th place is Deloitte, dropping, also continuing that trend of consultancy firms dipping slightly this year. But Microsoft make a really good movement in the right direction, up 2 places into position 4. So who's in the top 3? Well, KPMG bucking the trend by staying as they are at number 3, and holding on to that spot, whereas other consulting firms have dropped backwards. KPMG held its own. And number 2, Apple, forever popular and maintaining their number 2 status in Ireland with business students for 2022. But who are the winners? Well, it's Google. Google for a number of years in succession now have been the number 1 business students preference for organization they would love to join, and sure enough they are number 1 again this year, and fair play and congratulations for Google also for increasing their market share again this year after a couple of years of that slightly slipping despite remaining number 1. So there you go, there are the top organizations and the most attractive employers in Ireland for business students in 2022.
Yeah, so congratulations to Google. They do it quite regularly. They're sat across the way from us. They do very, very well in these rankings, but I know Google do a lot of work in this to make sure they maintain their attractiveness. But I want to focus on our number 3 slot because I'm welcoming Emily from KPMG, who looks after the campus career programs for KPMG, to say well done for coming 3rd. And as mentioned in the thing, bucking a trend really within the consulting firms to holding your position at number 3 there. Well done, Emily. And how does that make the team at KPMG feel after a tough year?
Yeah, absolutely. We're absolutely thrilled. I know there's lots of people logging in today from KPMG who would just be absolutely thrilled with that news. So no, it's brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's a great achievement. So look, tell me a little bit about how the programme was this year. I mean, obviously it must have been different a little bit from previous years in a way as we start to get back to some sort of human factor. And how did KPMG go about it this year? Was there any evolution in the campus this year? Activity?
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of shifted, I guess, from a fully virtual environment to a hybrid environment, and I think that's reflective in the way everyone's working in the office, but also students as well. So we had to adapt our approach to branding and marketing, campus events as well, to facilitate both in-person virtual activities, but also from a student programs perspective, which is one of my core areas, internships and placements, making sure our student programs experience, stayed as strong as ever, because we were working in a hybrid environment. So it's a brand new environment for everyone. And so I suppose just making sure our students had the right tools while they were working from home and having a really enjoyable time as well.
Yeah, it must be quite a different situation for those guys to come into. We're all used to working remotely now, but they must have been really different for them. So that's really good campaign then to look after, make sure they're ready for it effectively.
Exactly, yeah, because so much of what we do is, and the positive feedback that comes through on campus is down to word of mouth, as well as all the efforts that we put into our branding and marketing as well. So it's so important that we look after our people and look after our programs.
Yeah, great thing to do. So you've done well, actually, interestingly, as we'll see a little bit later in some part, you've actually done really well as an organisation across all categories, actually, of students. Well, whilst we're focusing on business here, of course, you've done well in other areas, and particularly in STEM. You've done really well, female STEM particularly as well. Has that been a focus for KPMG as part of the development of an organisation and the kind of people you employ?
Absolutely, yeah, because I suppose traditionally KPMG was known as an accounting firm. We're very much an accounting and consulting firm now. So our consulting practice has just absolutely exploded. And we've recently developed our Belfast Centre of Excellence, which focuses on AI, cybersecurity, and data analytics solutions for our clients as well. So really attracting STEM talent, and then of course attracting STEM females is so important to us. And with any hiring you're hoping for a 50-50 gender split. That's what you're going for. It has to be reflective of society, and for succession planning and everything, it's so important. So we've put a lot of effort in this year in terms of our marketing and our branding, bringing our strong females working in STEM careers to the fore in that as well.
Yeah, well, it definitely shows in the rankings. We've seen, the female side. It's KPMG have done extremely well in some of those areas and really quite significant. Whilst not necessarily in the top 3 like business yet, it's obviously an evolving journey for you guys. So no, really well done to KPMG, and congratulations to you and your team in having such good performance in these awards this year. It's been very, very good.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
So turning to Rosemary here to look at that. What are the? Oh, sorry, to Orla actually. One of the big moves we saw there in the top 10 was JP Morgan. Tell me a little bit about this, because what have JP Morgan, in your eyes, been doing in this last year? Because to move from 10 to 6, which is what they've done this year, is a significant move. We don't often see 4-point moves in the top 10. It takes quite a lot of market share shift. So tell us a little bit about what you've seen from JP Morgan.
So as you said, Steve, there hasn't been a lot of movement in the top 10. But first, I'd like to congratulate Emily and the team at KPMG for holding on to one of the top coveted spots. Irish Jobs have worked with KPMG for a long, long time, and we know how important graduate recruitment is to you. So it's great to see your hard work paying off. So yeah, Steve, coming back to JP Morgan, as you said, they're one of the few companies that have made kind of quite a dent in the rankings this year. They've moved 4 places, which is kudos to JP Morgan. They chose Dublin as their central tech hub, their first location outside of the States, and they're only based across the canal as well. So looking at the company reviews on Irish Jobs, we can see that they foster a very inclusive culture. They offer kind of great benefits, and it also says it's a really friendly culture there, and they offer really great development opportunities at JP Morgan. So I think, given possibly the fact that they've risen, so well in the rankings this year, maybe a possibility for them to put a dent in the top 3 there on that list. Who knows?
Don't tell Emily that. But yeah, absolutely. And actually, I mean, we see it across, obviously with me, not necessarily from Ireland, but we see it across Universum. JP Morgan always do well. They get students really, really well. They always do extremely well in these rankings, and it's good signs there for Ireland as well. One of the other lovely stories looking in the business rankings this year, turning to you, Rosemary, is with one or two of the Irish organisations, and most notably Aer Lingus have had a really positive move this year.
Yeah, Aer Lingus are up from 19th up to 12th this year, which I think is a big jump. Obviously, it's been a tough couple of years for the aviation industry in general. Yeah. So it's great to see that the confidence from the graduates kind of there are starting to come back. So, and last week they actually launched their aircraft maintenance and engineering apprenticeship. So that's really interesting. It'll be interesting to see if that has an effect then on maybe their rankings for next year.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think they're absolutely brilliant. And a real good sign of those industries coming back to life again in some respects, because it must have been seriously hard for those companies over the previous 2 years. So that's the business rankings, and thank you for your comments on those. We're now going to move on to the next segment, which is our engineering rankings.
So let's look at the top 20 companies for engineering students in Ireland in 2022. So in the first instance, looking at between 20 and 11, you see quite a lot of movement. So this is going to be a very interesting chart for sure. A number of companies going up and down there, notably Ryanair and Dell going very much in the right direction this year. So let's look at the top 10. So at number 10, Stryker holding their position at number 10. Aer Lingus, a good jump for them up into the top 10, as they were at number 11 last year. They're now at number 9. Johnson & Johnson holding their place at number 8. Jacobs Engineering dropping 2 places to number 7. Boston Scientific dropping 3 places to number 6. And then also dropping 3 places, Pfizer, who had a phenomenal year last year for many obvious reasons, have just dropped back out of the top 3 and are now at the 5th place with engineering students in Ireland. Apple have jumped 2 places to return into the upper areas where they usually are, and they sit at 4th place. Looking at top 3, so number 3, a really good jump from Microsoft. Obviously, as you can see, some companies dropped down the pecking order. Microsoft have taken their place and jumped into 3rd place with a 4-point move. And really interestingly, Google have dropped out of the number 1 position for the first time for many years in this area, and they've therefore been replaced. So who have they been replaced by? They've been replaced by Intel, who have jumped 3 places into number 1 slot. So congratulations to Intel. You are the Ireland's most attractive employer for engineering students in 2022. Congratulations.
Yes, and congratulations. And to celebrate, I would clap my hands if I didn't have a clicker and a piece of paper in my hand. But well done to Intel and Angela. I'd like to welcome Angela Burke, who works in employer branding for Intel. to join us to say congratulations.
Thank you. I feel like we need balloons or something.
I do. I feel like one of those emojis in the background where it all goes back on the live. No, brilliant. I mean, it must be so pleasing for Intel to have reached the number one spot in this. I mean, tell us a little bit about how that must make you guys feel, and a little bit of maybe what was it that you feel this year might have had an impact on the way in which students have seen Intel.
Yeah. So first of all, it's so exciting. It's really exciting. I actually was teasing a little bit this week in the office. I was telling them that we had a significant jump, but I didn't say what. So they'll be delighted when I go back.
Fantastic.
In terms of what we've done, I was having to think about this, Steve, and I actually think it didn't just start this year, but I actually think our journey started about 3 years ago. Yeah. My role was created about 3 years ago, and I think the first thing we really did was we figured out, well, what are the perceptions out there in the market of Intel? Yeah. And it would be no surprise that everyone was familiar with Intel, but more so on a commercial level. Yeah. And I think what was missing was everyone knew they had this big factory out in Leixlip, but they weren't really able to picture themselves working there. They didn't know, well, what would a career look like? So really over the last few years, 3 years in particular, we've really worked on, I guess, giving people a little peep in the window, a little insight into, well, this is what goes on in the factory, this is what a career looks like, but actually each year kind of building it on, this is how it relates to your skill set and your qualifications, and that's how you're relative to what we do.
Yeah. Very good. And just anecdotally as well, just for everybody who's watching, Intel have done well across the board actually as well. So this is something that, whilst we're focusing on engineering as being one of the areas here, actually Intel have done fantastic across the board. We've just sort of heard from KPMG about the fact that it's evolved a little bit, the going back to the university engagement and campus engagement. What has been the biggest challenge? I mean, you guys have done brilliantly, so you've had to seriously surmount some challenges to get there. But what have been the biggest challenges to Intel in doing this, and what are the biggest challenges to student engagement right now?
Yeah, I think if you think 2 years ago, it was just how are we going to engage with students? There's this massive wall put between us, this like virtual wall. Yeah. So I think for us, it was really kind of, I suppose we really kind of tried to tune into the student mindset and figure out, okay, well, what do they need right now? And also, how can we continue to help them to get an insight into who we are and what they would be doing, and help them visualize their skill set at Intel, but virtually. So I suppose in terms of, obviously all the fairs went online, that was fine. Yeah. But you do miss that kind of interaction. I think what was missing for us was, people can look at a job spec, they can learn so much at a virtual fair, but there's nothing like that kind of real kind of conversation, and even chatting to our engineers and our technicians. So one of the things actually we did in the past year, maybe this was one of the tricks that helped us jump, but was actually we ran virtual webinars, and we had our technicians and our engineers on with me. I hosted them. And
so you're used to this then?
Yeah, we're used to this. But I was literally just on front of my laptop. Very amateur environment. But the whole purpose, Steve, was to help the students hear from, they don't want to hear from me, they want to hear from the technicians, the engineers that are working in the careers that they are interested in. And I think what we really focused on was, stripping it all back. There was no freebies, it was literally just them listening, having a conversation, asking the questions that they want to ask, but getting the answers from people they can relate to that are just a year or two ahead of them in their career. So I think that worked really well because it brought the job spec to life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and people were able to visualize then, okay, so this is what I would be doing day to day.
Every early careers team I've spoken to, I know your employer branding more than just early careers, I've said how much the last 2 years have enhanced their capability as student employers, because you have to work out all the different touch points now, don't you? You have to think about so many different things, whereas it was more one-dimensional up until 2 years ago, was it? It was all one-dimensional. So I think it's really interesting to see what you guys have been doing, and actually it is a learning experience through this period,
for everyone.
Really, for everybody. So no, really good. Well, look, fantastic, really great news. I mean, like, as much as we all love all the companies on here, Google have dominated this for so many years, and it'll no doubt give them a little bit of a pinch that somebody's just jumped ahead of them in this. But it's certainly great to see Intel go on that journey and do so well and get to the top in students' appreciation. So well done to you, Angela, and everybody at Intel. Just turning to the team here, really. So look, we've seen some interesting moves up, Rosemary. We've seen companies just looking down the list. We saw Activision Blizzard go forward quite a bit. Bristol Myers Squibb took a really big jump there. HSC had a really good jump as well in engineering. But one big mover is Irish Rail. Tell us a little bit from what you've seen on Irish Rail. They've actually jumped into our rankings this year.
Yeah, so yeah, it's their first time in the rankings and they've come straight in at 22, which I think is an amazing achievement. It's great to see that they're so well thought of amongst engineering graduates, absolutely. I seen that in September last year, they actually launched a really extensive engineering graduate program, and that would have been just before our research went into field. So it looks like that's been a success for them because it's reflected in the rankings this year. So yeah, it looks like they've done fantastically well, yeah.
Exactly. It's good to see the traditional companies that have been around for a long time still being able to
100%.
attract into the engineering space as well. So that's fantastic. So look, that's engineering. Really lovely to catch up with you, Angela, and share some of what Intel is about. And congratulations to all the companies who have done very, very well in engineering. We'll take a pause from the winners for a bit. And this little segment that we're going to look at now looks at some of the insights that we found inside, particularly relating to the success of international organizations in the rankings this year.
So in this little segment, I want to look at some of the trends that have come from the research in 2022 within Irish students. And one of the things that stood out a little bit as a clear trend as the pandemic comes to a gradual close, and more pertinently, we go back to sort of more normal working environments, the opportunities therefore become different again for students. And therefore, I want to highlight some sort of interesting trends that have come out of the research this year. And one of them appears to be, and we're seeing it in the rankings, a shift back towards global corporations. During the pandemic, there was a lot of a coming home feel about the way in which students and professionals chose organizations as their preferred organizations. You know, they're close to home, we're in it together, backing each other, much more of a family, collegiate feel. However, as we come into a sort of a new generation or a new kind of world after the pandemic, what we're starting to see now is a slight shift in preferences. So here we can see 52% of Irish students would prefer to work for a company that originated in Ireland. That's still a good figure. That's a figure of more than a half that says they would rather work for an indigenous organization. But it represents a reduction. 58% was a figure in 2021. So what we're seeing is a bit of a shift away from the close to home feel that we talked about, and the propensity to be able to travel a little bit more, that being much more on the agenda, therefore clearly starting to open the eyes of students into what is possible beyond the boundaries of just Ireland alone. And another way of representing this shift, and this is quite some stark representation I'm going to share here, is this number plus 63. Then this number is the cumulative ranking movement of non-Indigenous Irish international companies in the top 50 for business students. So this is of all the companies in the top 50 who are not originating in Ireland, who are international organizations, the cumulative ranking rise is 63 places when you add them all up together. Comparatively, the Irish organisations, the companies that are founded in Ireland that sit in the top 50 for business students, dropped 33%. And obviously this is reasonably consistent across a number of the vocational areas of education, of university education with the students. So we're seeing quite a significant shift here, and it's something therefore that organisations who are based in Ireland or have come originally from Ireland might want to look at how they address this. So let's look at some other things in a little greater detail to give us a little bit more of a picture. One of the challenging areas we see is salary expectations. And obviously, these numbers represent the shift in increasing salary expectations by students in each of the categories. So engineering students have put a figure that's 11% higher than in 2021. Tech and IT students, 12% higher, and science and business students 8% higher than 2021. What does that represent in numbers? Engineering students expect on average to earn 42,000 euros when they leave university, when they leave their studies at least. Tech and IT students, 41,000. Science students, 38,632, and business just under 38,000 euros also. So what we're also seeing there is an increased pressure on organizations to be able to pay a little bit more. And we're all aware of the world costing a little bit more right now, and there's a lot of things that are obviously affecting these decisions, but naturally as well, what we're also seeing therefore across the board is just a demand for more income as people go into the workplace, and that puts pressure on local organizations as well. Not to say that it's not a pressure for the larger organizations, and then maybe the big international organizations are also having to combat this challenge, but of course naturally it becomes harder for the smaller SME organization or the company that is purely based in Ireland. So looking at some of the preference changes, so using the Universum 40 drivers of employer attractiveness, which is a globally recognized and the most used measurement of employer brand attractiveness versus the demands of talent. These are the elements that, on the whole, Irish students saying they are looking for the most in an organization. And what we see from this, given what we've just looked at in regards to salary, is a much more pragmatic lean towards the areas of our 40 drivers that are around remuneration and advancement opportunities and job characteristics, the greens and the blacks in our 40 drivers methodologies. And you can see that and they take up 6 of the top 10 places. And that gives us a real idea that these pragmatic, financial, career-orientated, secure-driven factors are leading the way, are the most demanded things, and therefore, and again, probably are slightly more associated with those larger international organizations and maybe some of the smaller organizations, especially having come out of a 2-year period where safety has been paramount, but security has not been easy to find amongst employment. So is this a challenge? Is this a real problem for Indigenous Irish organisations? Well, maybe it isn't in one respect, but the opportunity and the advice that comes from me in terms of how do we address this? How do we address how we sell ourselves the best in the way in which we talk about our organisations? Well, let's look at the other 4 that exist in the top 10 that absolutely are clear indicators of things that people are looking for when they go into the workplace that absolutely fit at the heart of SME organizations and the heart of Irish organizations. Friendly work environment, the work-life balance element, respect for people, really good one, and ethical standards. So those 4, I would embrace, or all people, of course, on this call to be able to kind of consider about how we talk about these things. Because whilst the other areas are important, they're also largely hygiene factors, salary, professional working environment, training, etc. Those, in a sense, those are expected elements when you've just completed a degree and you're going into the workplace. Sure, earnings, training, salary, of course, they're going to be very important. But the variable factors are those 4 that I've highlighted: the friendly work environment, the work-life balance, respect and ethical standards. These are things that we can personally tell about our organizations. We can find very human stories around those 4 factors. And therefore, I would encourage us to look at how we infiltrate those 4 elements into the way in which we talk about our organization. Look for authenticity, for sure, but look for human, very real stories. So if we can show the blend of these human elements in the way in which we communicate to talent, knowing that we could probably support some of the other ones in any case because they're part of the hygiene factors of choosing a role, we might address the balance correctly. And of course, this is the same for large organizations as well. You'll absolutely want to look at these 4 things. But here's some signals as to how that we balance employer brand communication and recruitment marketing communication to ensure that we are not just losing out to international large organizations, but we're also telling our own human stories in a way that is engaging regardless of the size of our organization. So hopefully some useful tips in this first segment that give us an idea of some of the trends that are happening and the way we might want to all address them as organizations moving forward.
Oh, yes, hopefully that was interesting and hopefully insightful. What it was insightful for me was how my voice goes from gravel to very high very quickly sometimes. I'll have to try and work on that one. So going back to the winners, the next segment of winners is our tech talent. So over to find out who are the top 10, 20 companies in tech.
So here we are, the top organizations in Ireland in the eyes of IT and tech students in 2022. As we know, a hotly contested talent zone in Ireland. So looking at the first number of companies in the 20 to 11 positions, some very dramatic moves there. You can see some organizations have absolutely flown up the rankings this year and have obviously been doing some really great stuff for their campus activity. AIB, 25 places, eBay, 15 places, Salesforce, 26 places. So really great achievements from some of those organizations there and clearly doing some really, really impactful stuff with students in Ireland. Certainly tech students are seeing it. This is the top 10. So as we go into the top 10, we see PayPal have jumped into there. They've jumped 3 places to number 10. Dell have dropped back. They're in 9th place, have dropped 2 places. Samsung have risen a place by 1, and IBM have also risen a place by 1. Facebook holds its place at number 6. Intel at 5, holding its place also, and equally holding the same position, Amazon in 4th position. So looking at the top 3, at number 3, Apple holding their own and also at number 3. And Microsoft right there at number 2 as they were in 2021. And at the top, tech students in Ireland, no surprises really that Google win the way again here. Congratulations to Google, always innovating and always working on making sure that they are consistently attractive to future talent, and they've done it again in Ireland this year. So congratulations to Google, Ireland's most attractive employer in the eyes of IT and tech students in 2022.
Yes, congrats Google. And also to Intel in the room as well, obviously, as we've met already, also right up there amongst the upper echelons in tech, as you would imagine. Orla, when we saw that top 20 there was some quite dramatic moves in the sort of in the teens. One was Salesforce. Tell us a little bit about what you see from Salesforce. That was 26 places they jumped, which is kind of remarkable, really.
Very remarkable. Yeah, 26 places when you consider there's not much movement on this list, particularly the top 3 kind of usual contenders, Steve. We're so well used to seeing our 3 winners appear here, and well done to them. Salesforce, yeah, 26 places. They're doing something right. That's what I'd be saying here. And it's unusual not to see Salesforce appearing on global rankings, I think, like Universum's. From looking at the reviews on Irish Jobs for Salesforce, it's very hard to find a negative review. It's all about kind of an amazing culture, awesome technology, great benefits, really, really good place to work. It's like nearly, I think it's 4.5-star reviews that are there. Yeah. I think the only negative I could see was that the canteen mightn't be stocked up as often as
that is important.
Absolutely.
I'd be complaining, definitely.
Yeah, so they talk a lot about, they run an awful lot of kind of volunteer programs, giving back to local and international communities. The other thing then that I thought was quite interesting was they have week-free meetings. So imagine a week without meetings. I think that's something I might champion for here. In Irish Jobs. So yeah, Salesforce doing some great things.
I'd take a day without meetings, and that would make life a lot easier. All the unnecessary ones. We know the ones we mean, don't we? Looking into some of the people who moved a little bit, we saw Rosemary. We saw eBay had a big move in the top 20. We saw AIB also had a really good move from 44 to 19. But tell us a little bit about Central Bank of Ireland, because they've had a really good move as well, haven't they?
Absolutely, yes. Central Bank up from 46th to 28th this year, which is a huge jump. I know that they actually launched a massive digital campaign towards the end of last year, which they partnered with the Irish Jobs marketing team with to help promote. Yeah,
That's why they won.
Yeah, take the credit. But yeah, the videos it was all video content. It was just about interviewing people that are going through the graduate program or have just finished it. And it was just, you know, as you keep saying, that human aspect, I think, has really resonated with people. So yeah, they done that towards the end of last year, just as our research was going into field again. And clearly it's been a success for them. So it's great news.
Clearly has. And look, and I think we're all aware that banks and tech is joining together so much, that the push for banks to get more tech talent, as is everybody's trying to get tech talent, is really, really good. So to see banks and local banks like Central Bank of Ireland have that success is really rewarding to see. So yes, fantastic. So that was the Tech Top 20 and some of the winners of tech. Let's look at the next segment, which is natural sciences.
So let's look at natural science students in 2022. Who have they regarded as their most attractive employers in Ireland? Well, let's start with as previously, with the companies that are in the zone 11 to 20 in the rankings. And you'll see everybody's been moving. So there's a little bit of movement around here. Good performances in there from Apple and Microsoft amongst natural sciences organisation, which is students, which is fascinating. Intel as well. So tech doing very well in these reaches down here. But let's look into the top 10 and see what we've got to look at here. So Regeneron did very well last year, but dropped 3 places this year to number 10. Dairygold, good rise for them, up 3 places into 9th. And MSD jumping 2 places to end up in 8th this year. Kerry Group, a little drop for them. They've dropped 1 place into 7th, and Google have risen 2 places up to number 6 with these natural sciences cohort of students. 5th place, Glanbia, dropping a place from last year, and HSC would appear were taking their place as they jumped 1 place up into number 4. So number 3, who's in 3rd place? Well, Boston Scientific holding the 3rd position again this year. Looking at number 2, Johnson & Johnson, also holding ground in 2nd place and winning the way with natural sciences after a very great year last year. Needless to say, again, Pfizer right at the top there. Congratulations to Pfizer. You are the most attractive employer in Ireland for natural sciences students in 2022. Congratulations.
Yeah, congrats to Pfizer. We saw Pfizer have a massive rise last year with the pandemic and obviously their effects on the pandemic, and the others, obviously some pandemic heroes in there. So congratulations to Pfizer again for being at the top of this one. Orla, obviously familiar faces at the top there, etc. What are the observations you've seen from that? What catches your eye in that top 20?
First of all, I think it's nice to see the pandemic heroes, you know, holding on to their top spots, because it wasn't unusual when we first did this webinar 2 years ago to see them there, Steve. For me, what's very interesting on the rankings is the rise of the multinationals. So they're the ones climbing their way up the rankings this year, which I think is very, very interesting. And goes back to what you said earlier about, you know, maybe the challenges for Indigenous Irish employers. So the question I would probably ask of you is, what can potentially the, you know, Irish food manufacturing businesses do here to gain back a bit of the love potentially that they've lost from Irish graduates?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It totally reflects, this is certainly is one that reflects very much on what we shared earlier with regard to it, because it seems like all these international organisations have sort of stolen the local businesses' spots. So what we see here is quite a lot of the local business just dropping a place will do, dropping 2 or 3 places, which probably accounts for greater energies from those larger companies. But I think for the local companies, that remember the piece we talked about earlier around where employees, where students are looking for that maybe are less to do with big stability, big career opportunities, and blah, blah, maybe some of those human factors. Because certainly our experience working with a number of Indigenous Irish, I always struggle with Indigenous, Indigenous Irish companies, on some of their EVP work and their employer brand work, what we tend to focus on quite a bit is very much the heart of the organisation, the passion, the thread that almost comes from the earth in a sense now, and that's almost literal with the kind of companies we're talking about here, that real kind of very human, family, collegiate kind of feel that we find amongst those companies really gives them something to stand apart from maybe some of the larger competitors that it's tough for them to compete for talent with. So I would look for those stories inside the organisation, look for the heart. Don't always think about the big picture, look at where the ground is and where some of the real Irish temperament and love comes from, really, that you can bring to the fore, I would guess. And I don't think it would take much for some of these companies to push back up in these rankings.
Some great advice there.
So look, that's natural science. That was the top 20 in the natural sciences. Now, we're going to move into another segment of insights that we looked at here. And the next one we're going to look at is the tech trends of this year. As we know, tech talent is pretty important in Ireland, and there's a massive battle for tech talent in Ireland. So I wanted to share some of the things that are coming out of the research and when we look specifically at the tech students. So, so here's a little segment on that.
In this segment, we want to look at tech talent trends in Ireland. As we know, Ireland is a hotbed for organisations wishing to hire tech talent, great tech employers across the country, and therefore, needless to say, the demands of tech talent is pretty essential to understand if we get our differentiation right out there in the marketplace. So let's have a little look at who was in the research that we did amongst tech students in Ireland and some of the preferences we've collected from them as well. So to give you an idea of the balance between male and female, it's not evolving too far, it's fair to say. In the students that responded this year, 72% were male, 28% were female. So we are still seeing that typical kind of 75-25, 70-30 kind of split that has been inherent for a number of years, actually. So doesn't necessarily imply that there are more female talent coming into the Irish tech marketplace at the moment. So something to consider. Just for a bit of an idea on data, that you can see there where the universities are, where the most of our respondents were. The Technology University of Dublin is the one that has increased quite rapidly, and is also the most prominent zone where we get response from tech students, and you can see a number of others down that list as well. And just on the right hand side, just you can see where the popularity is of the kind of studies that are being done. Computer science being the highest one, programming is up to 45% actually this year compared to 39 previously. Software engineering has grown, as well as website design and development. So some clear sort of popular subjects there. Data science, we all know how important data science talents are, and as you can see also the amount of students doing data science is increasing, so so that's good. Looking across the bottom, the trends of where tech students want to work. One of the things that we've always sort of been familiar with in recent years is the lure of the startup, and potentially that's been taking a bit of a hit in recent years. And actually, in this last year, what we see here is a 4% rise in tech students wanting to work for an established organisation, up to 88% now, and the startup only down at 12%. So something that startups will need to think about when they consider targeting young tech talent is whether they're offering sufficient to be able to entice young talent to come and want to work for them. Some of our signals will hopefully help that. In the second box there, you can the graph at the bottom there, you can see similarly to what we looked at earlier in the general population, we're seeing a little bit of a rise of companies, popularity of companies who are founded outside of Ireland rather than Ireland organisations founded in Ireland. It got quite a big jump, actually, 7% both ways on that one. So again, I think something local organisations need to sort of understand and consider how they address. And here we can see as well, using the parallel with the international organizations, the lean is towards companies with global operations in a world where we can travel again and we feel a little bit more closer to the rest of the world post-COVID. people are obviously slightly more inclined to want to work with a global organization. So something to consider in the way in which students are thinking when we're trying to attract tech talent. So let's work out what matters to them most, similar to what we looked at earlier. These are the things that are most important attributes to tech talent are on the left-hand side there. And those 5 are the ones that grew the most in 2022, and they were work-life balance, flexible working conditions, competitive salary, and embracing new tech. So intriguingly, there are some quite solid things that people are looking for there. There's some quite fun things as well. Flexibility and work-life balance. That's something we're not showing in this segment here, but actually 85% of tech talent said they would prefer to work in a remote scenario rather than office scenario. So that gives you an idea about the next generation of tech talent coming to the workspace, feel as though they can work independently from home. So those are the rising elements we see there. The ones that dipped: friendly work environment, secure employment, and clear path for advancement. The top 2 didn't dip much, just a little drop by 1 place. Clear path for advancement actually dropped quite considerably, and it suggests maybe for tech talent, long career growth within an organization might not be the thing that really pulls them right now. There are other factors as to why they would want to come and join your organization, but maybe not necessarily the sticking around for 5 or 10 years to see how their career develops with your organization. Clear path for advancement actually dropped from 3rd last year to 10th this year, so quite a significant change. Interesting one I wanted to look at here. I want to focus on 2 of our 40 attributes here. One of them is ethical standards, and you'll see it's in the category in the right of top 5, increasing in most importance. And the journey of ethical standards has really grown this last 2 years. If you look at 2020, the period just leading into the pandemic, when they were surveyed, it was the 26th ranked out of the 40 drivers of employee attractiveness that tech students looked for in an organization. Ethical standards really wasn't that important. But then last year we saw a rise from 26 to 19. And then again, we've seen the same 7-point rise to now being the 12th most desired attribute in an organization. And therefore, this is telling us a little bit of a story about the needs and desires of young tech talent right now. They're looking for ethics. They're looking for organizations with a good positive message, good culture, good levels of inclusivity, sustainability, purpose, etc., etc. So something to think about in terms of the trends, the analysis we start to see moving through the years. Equally, one of the fascinating things for something like tech, which institutionally has always been one of those real positive drivers, is innovation. And look at the last 3 years again. In 2020, it was the 6th most important driver in an organization that these tech talent would look for. 2021, it dipped to 9th. 2022, it dipped again to 11th. So what we're seeing here is that innovation maybe it's a tired subject. Maybe it isn't a thing that's important to tech talent any longer. I would say it is, but I think it feels like it's probably one of those hygiene factors that is expected that when they join an organization in a tech environment, they're going to be surrounded by a degree of innovation. But maybe it also tells us a little bit about cliche employer branding and us using the same messages over and over again that all the other organizations are doing. That maybe innovation isn't quite the pull that it was. So there's some interesting stuff on tech talent. Hopefully really interesting stuff for you to take away in terms of what they're looking for and what they care about. But finally, let's just look at the women and men, look at the differences here. Just looking at this as a snapshot. When we look at targeting talent and when we will help organizations understand how to target talent, we need to understand the differences between male talent and female talent, because the needs and drivers are quite different. And arguably, they're slightly cliche, as we see on the left-hand side. Women much more human in their expectation of an organization. Look at the difference between the support for gender equality. It's the 9th most important factor for women, the 37th most important for men. But also we see D&I significantly higher than men. We see ethical standards significantly higher than men, purpose, as well as the sponsorship for future education. And when we flip to the right-hand side, we see that men are driven much more by comparison by career growth, salary, and the performance and prestige of the environment that they are working within. So a very different mix, slightly cliche in some respects, like I say, but actually really important to understand. If you're looking for things that are common amongst most, then you see the ones in the middle there, where actually these areas are equally attractive to either, but certainly super fascinating to understand the attraction of men and the attraction of women and what it is they look for when they're going into their tech career as they graduate. Hopefully that's been an interesting thing to help you understand tech talent, future tech talent in 2022.
So yeah, so there you go. Tech talent, ever changing, keeping us on our toes every year, just so we can make sure that we keep employer branding to tech talent completely alive, because they are a very fast-moving cohort of talent. So back to some of the awards of some of the winners. So the next segment we're going to quickly look at is the 3 remaining categories that we segment talent into. So over to the next section where we'll look at the top 10s in each of those 3 categories.
So here we're going to look at the 3 remaining categories that we group our students into our research. And the first one of those is health and medicine students. So let's have a look at what health and medicine students think of employers this year. So looking at the top 10, Novartis sit at 10. They've dropped a place since 2021. GSK have replaced them in 9th, going up 1 place. Laya Healthcare have dropped 2 places into 8th. And in 7th, Abbott have done extremely well. 4 places they've jumped to reach a top 10 position into a really good 7th place. Google have done extremely well. They are in 6th and have jumped 7 places since 2021. Boston Scientific are in 5th and they're holding their 5th place, and VHI Healthcare are in 4th. If we look into 3rd, Johnson & Johnson hold 3rd position from 2021, and equally Pfizer hold their 2nd position from 2021 as well, which means the winner of the most attractive employer with health and medicine students in Ireland in 2022 is once again HSC, the Health Service Executive, who once again are clearly the most attractive employer for health and medicine students in Ireland this year again. So well done to you guys for that. Let's move forward into law students next. So law, the first thing you'll see from our law cohort, not an enormous amount of movement this year. Pretty steady group of leading companies in Ireland. Department for Defence, Apple, Department of Foreign Affairs have all stayed in their positions at 10th, 9th, 8th, respectively. McCann Fitzgerald, they dropped a bit. They dropped from 6th to 7th, and William Fry took their place in 6th. Google have held the position of 5th, and then in 4th place, it's still Matheson. Looking in the top 3, Arthur Cox dropped a place. They were number 2 last year. This year, they're number 3. So that has meant a positive move for the Department of Justice and Equality, who have moved up into 2nd place with law students in 2022. But the leading company as far as law students are concerned in Ireland for employment is A&L Goodbody. So congratulations to you again for holding the number 1 spot as the most attractive employers in Ireland for law students. So congratulations. And the final grouping is what we call here social humanities students in 2022. So this is a collection of a lot of the social sciences, a lot of the humanities and lifestyle subjects, as well as education. So there's quite a collection of different fields of study that make up this grouping in this particular section. So let's see what they regard as the most attractive employers in Ireland. So number 10 is Aer Lingus. They were 8 last year. They've dropped a couple of places, but Virgin Media have done really well. They've jumped into 9th, taking their place in the top 10. Microsoft jumped 1 place into 8th, and then the Irish Police Force sits at number 7, just as they were last year. Civil Service has dropped a place up to 6th, and Apple has taken that spot. They are now 5th place, having jumped that 1 place. And the HSC are sitting in 4th place amongst this cohort of talent. So at number 3, we see a mover. RTE, who were in 2 last year, have dropped into 3. And Google have taken their place as number 2 amongst this group of talent. But the number 1 company for this group of People in Ireland in 2022 is the Department for Education. So congratulations to the people from the Department of Education. You remain the most attractive employer. The routes into teaching remain the most attractive career routes for people across social, humanities and education in the students in Ireland in 2022. So congratulations to you all.
Yeah, and congratulations to everybody listed within them 3 categories there, especially the winners, HSE, A&L Goodbody, and obviously the Department of Education, who came first as well. We've decided to give Steve a bit of a break. I'm going to be the one asking the questions now for a short minute. Obviously the panel are still here with us, Steve and Orla, and of course Emily from KPMG. We're just going to take a bit of a deeper dive into some of the trends that we've been talking about today. Emily, if we start with you, if that's okay. Obviously, one of the things that we're seeing is that the larger international organisations have seen the biggest rises. From your perspective, why do you think that that is?
Yeah, I suppose from what we see, certainly chatting with students and during interviews as well, they've kind of for the last 2 years been cooped up living from their bedrooms in all respects. So international travel and that kind of opportunity is incredibly appealing for them. And I suppose from our own perspective, we're an international firm, multinational firm. We have KPMG offices all over the globe. So we're in a lucky position as an international firm to be able to leverage those connections, and we have a well-established global mobility program that kind of had a funny few years, but we're kind of back up and running and everything now. So speaking about that, those future opportunities once graduates finish the graduate program as well, to work abroad for 6 months, you know, a year with KPMG firm, that's incredibly attractive. And then I suppose from a student programs side of things, we actually have 2 programs at internship and placement level that offer international working opportunities in KPMG offices, for example, in the US. So that's really attractive for students, and we have the resources and the capability to be able to host those programs. So I think from our own perspective, from my perspective, that's certainly what I see it might be contributing to the kind of interest in international firms.
Yeah, definitely. And Orla, from an Irish jobs perspective then, are you seeing an increase in job postings from larger international organisations as well?
You know, we're seeing an increase overall. So our last jobs index from Q1 showed that jobs were up 52% versus the same period pre-pandemic. That's huge, huge increase in the number of jobs advertised. Interestingly, what we did see was that work from home entered our top 10 keyword searches for the first time ever. So there's definitely a demand there from job seekers to have that greater kind of flexibility, work-life balance. And I think that's probably going back to Steve, something that you mentioned earlier about, again, how can Indigenous, you know, Irish employers, you know, make a dent in the rankings. So I think how possibly, you know, your smaller companies can do that is by offering greater flexibility. You know, a lot of them can't compete with the deep pockets of the multinationals. So to provide greater work-life balance, and also I think an awful lot of employees, and like I can see it here in Irish Jobs, they're very conscious now of what they're spending on their coffees and their burritos when they go out. That all adds up. If you're doing that a couple of days a week in the office, you know, that adds to your overall how healthy your bottom line is at the end of the year. So it's definitely an opportunity, I think, for Indigenous Irish employers there to look at that work-life balance, flexibility piece.
Yeah, definitely. And another trend that we were talking about earlier is obviously the IT and tech trends. One thing we've seen there is the prominence and the rise in interest of ethical standards and the kind of dip towards innovation. Steve, do you think that just graduates are starting to get bored of the phrase innovation, or what do you think it is because of that is?
I think as alluded to in the piece that I did, the word innovation is kind of overused really in technology, and look across the board, not just tech, of course. But so I can imagine there's an element of, whether we call it boredom, it's certainly there's a tiring of saying the same things, and I guess from an employer brand advice perspective, this is where we've got to be a bit clever about this kind of stuff. We tend to say the same things over and over again quite a lot. And every company needs to look for some distinction in the way in which they describe elements of the way in which they perform innovation. Maybe even by not using the word innovation, because clearly, as we saw the rankings there, the pull of the word is not quite so appealing. Innovation comes in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, and therefore I think the goal of expressing innovation in a way that makes it less cliche, less, we've seen it all before, less boredom effectively, is to talk about the purpose of the innovation. What does innovation lead to? And I think the work that we've done with companies is around what's the point of innovation? Is innovation just to make somebody's job more fun behind a laptop? Well, actually, probably 5-10 years ago, it was actually. The drive was much more towards the funky tech and the cool stuff. And one of the cool things, in fact, I remember running employer branding campaigns for startups where that's the thing we sold. You're going to do a cool thing here that you didn't do in your place here with a cool bit of tech. But now what we've seen with the rankings and and some of those attribute changes is that people want to know why they're innovating. They want to know the ethics, they want to know the purpose, they want to know the reason why they're innovating. And so we're finding that is the slant we need to look for now, is not just innovation alone, but the outcome of innovation, I would say, is my best advice I would give there.
Yeah. And Emily, obviously you're working in the campus recruitment area. Is that something you're seeing as well, that people are resonating more with the ethical standards and morally focused attributes rather than the kind of previously harder attributes?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, when we're chatting with students on campus or during the interview process, you know, things that are very important to them that often come up in conversation is around the areas of you know, ESG and sustainability, inclusion and diversity, corporate citizenship, and we're quite lucky that that is equates with our own values. You know, they're very important elements of our culture, and on a day-to-day basis in KPMG, you can see that whether it's all the different Pride activities that are happening now this week, or you know, we have a lot of initiatives kind of striving towards our goal to become net carbon zero by 2030, for example, and our graduates and interns and placements are very much heavily on a day-to-day basis involved in these activities and initiatives, and they're going back on campus to share that with other students as well. But we're very focused on being able to show to an external audience, you know, students on campus, what our values look like at KPMG. So showcasing our Pride activities, you know, on our social media platforms, for example, or other different things as well. So yeah, it's very important to students, those kind of ethics. Yeah. And you know, it's very key for us in kind of showcasing our ethics and our values externally to them as well.
Definitely, and I think that's going to be really important going forward as well, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Steve, I know earlier you were talking about some of the more recent trends in employer branding. Obviously, with the recovery from the pandemic, it seems to have completely shifted the landscape in relation to the relationship between employers and talent. How are you seeing that kind of materialising in the work that you're doing with some of your clients at the moment?
Yeah, it's quite integral. I think as alluded to earlier, I think I believe that relationship has had a knock. We were hypercare 2 years ago. We love our people. We're gonna put on yoga classes on Zoom, and we're gonna put care packages out there. And we loved them greatly for a year, and then we asked them to come back to work, and we did it with a bit of a thud. And let's be fair, we all tried to do it in the best way we could, but on the whole, we did it with a bit of a thud. And then, of course, the Great Resignation happened as a consequence of that. And I believe it's down to trust. It comes back to that. Not just the fact of coming back to the office, because actually a lot of people were quite happy to come back to the office, and I know I'm chuffed to see my colleagues again now. But it's the way it was done. It was the kind of the step drop effectively that kind of happened, and therefore I think there's a repairing of relationships that is sort of going on really right now with people. So I mentioned earlier around the fact that I think, you know, there's more examples of companies looking inwardly around their employer brands, etc. And I think this is really important. I mean, one of the pieces of advice we give all around all employer brand activity is bring your people on board. Like, always make sure that it's their employer brand, their story, their part of the program, rather than it being just an HR recruitment exercise. That actually they are integral to it. And I think any example where we bring the employees to the fore as heroes, you know, remove the stock photography, remove the kind of like the cliche employer branding imagery and all that kind of, and look at humans and look at people and bring them to the fore. Because I can guarantee you right now, if I see my colleague in a video online, or if I see my colleague in a centerpiece, I'm going to share it because that's my colleague, that's my pal, that's my friend, that's this person I see over the coffee pot every day. So I think the way in which we engage our employees much closer to what we do, bring them in on the journey together, make them part of that employer brand message, I think is the reparation journey that I think we're starting to see happen. And I think all our advice is built around looking inward, getting everybody together, and then reaching out to the world. I think it's quite important.
Yeah, definitely. And Emily, are you seeing kind of the same type of trends? Have you had to do stuff differently specifically this year than you would have had to do before?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an incredibly competitive market out there, and it's a new hybrid environment, and certainly inflation doesn't help things, but back to your point as well. So yeah, we're doing things, completely differently, and we are trying to be creative and innovative in how we're attracting students to KPMG. So taking that hybrid approach and coming up with new and novel ideas in how to attract students, but I suppose as well looking at our packages for our staff from a holistic perspective. It's not just the financial side as well, but looking at things like additional annual leave, flexible working, obviously hybrid working. We have early finish Fridays over the summer, which I'm very much looking forward to tomorrow. And other things around the well-being space as well. So yeah, absolutely. We're trying to get creative and trying to get innovative in such a very competitive market, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time and for everybody for sharing your thoughts. I hope that everybody watching has been able to take some really valuable insights from that. If you do have any questions, please do put them into the Q&A box. We are going to be answering those after the event. And if you're curious about how to get in touch with Universum about anything else, then here's how to do that.
It's been a pleasure sharing our data and our insights with you today for the Irish market. As a consequence of what we've shared today, you may have some questions, you may have some things that you would like to talk about subsequently. There you can see on the screen some of our areas of expertise and around the subject of employer branding, talent insights, and recruitment marketing. If you'd like to get in touch with us, this is how to do so. You can get in touch with either myself or Rosemary as a first point of contact to try and understand a little bit more around what Universum has researched and how it can help your business. It's been a pleasure sharing our information with you today.
Yeah, look, so thank you for everyone. That's a sort of a wrap for what we've done today. Hopefully it's been enjoyable and interesting. It's certainly been different for us. Thank you to Orla, Rosemary, Angela and Emily for coming along and joining us and giving us so much great insights today that hopefully gives you a bit of a reflection on what the market is like right now. Thank you for bearing with us as we've done this in a slightly different way this time, and hopefully it came across nice and smoothly, and hopefully enjoyed the lovely backdrop that we've done it from. Thanks for being part of it. You know how to get in hold of us now if you want to chat any further about what we've shared today, and thanks for taking the time to join us on this session. Goodbye.